joining us today.
Pleasure's all mine.
And you're a solution architect at iDaily.
Yes.
You're into data security. It's a
Yes.
very important domain these days with AI crawling everywhere. We're talking about productivity, automating business workflows, but it is always security first. Because you get there and then you break at a point of time you don't want to do. It's a major debt for the company in terms of financial, in terms of trust and security and whatnot. So I'm glad that you guys are here to talk about security today. So if, let's say we have a SMB company, small and medium-sized companies, their pressure is to deliver and get more customers, right? So what will be your advice today with this AI first era? Where do they start?
Well, the first place that they would start is the same place that a company of any size should start. Their size really doesn't matter, and that is with security, governance. If they have any compliance or regulations that they have to be prove compliancy to, start with that. Then the next piece is building what I would refer to as an intelligence platform. But really what that means is getting their data estate in order, getting their data house of cards properly sorted, knowing what data they have, where it is, if they want to consolidate it into any kind of warehouse to ground any of the agents or AI models that they might be running within their organization. Those are the first pieces. And we actually have a framework that we've developed at iDaily that walks customers and clients through that process. And we can deliver that framework in the form of a workshop where we either come on site or do it remotely with a small group of invested parties, invested staff from the organization, and start talking about those things at the beginning, right? First, getting people excited. What are your thoughts on AI? What do you want to see it do? How can it enable your small business to grow, right? Okay, that's great. Let's put that aside for a minute. For those things to occur, for AI to be able to do that, what are the downsides? What are the risks that you see to your company if it doesn't do what you think it does correctly, right? And inevitably it comes to data loss and security issues. Not necessarily even data loss, but maybe the wrong people in the organization getting answers to the wrong types of questions, right? Why does a warehouse manager need to know what the CEO's salary is? They don't, right? So making sure those types of things don't happen. And the way that you get there at the beginning is to talk about these things up front, and that's always what we do.
That's right. Can you walk me through those steps on a very high level? So what do you do? Like if I come to you, hey, you know what, I'm not comfortable with the security, the features that I have today, can you guys come and help me? At a high level, what would you do with me?
So at a high level, we would start with what we call a tenant assessment. If you are a Microsoft shop and you have a Microsoft tenant already stood up, we have another solution architect in our Microsoft practice who will come in and has a set of tools to make sure that your tenant is secure according to best practices, both industry and Microsoft best practices. And then if you have any compliance needs like FedRAMP or HIPAA, also running the tools with those set of policies in place to see where you have any policy violations. Then he provides an output of that, and this covers not just your intratenant, but it also covers things like Purview if you have it enabled, and it covers also anything in M365. So SharePoint, Viva, any of those things that you may be using, all of that gets put and packaged into a nice report that says, here's all the good things we found, here are the bad things we found, here's the risks we found, right? Think about errors versus warnings, right? These are best practices, these are nice to haves. We compile that into a report and give that back to the client. And we say, here's where you sit today. And as part of that now, we've recently added on to that a Copilot readiness portion that says, okay, if you are going to buy Copilot licenses for your people, before you assign those licenses and turn it loose, these are the things that they're going to have access to, or these are the best practices that you should put policies in place to prevent their access to, right? So they get that report, and then the next step of that is, here's your report, and that's all done for a fixed fee. It depends on the size of the organization, and it depends on how much data they have and those types of things, but it's just a flat fee. Then after that, that solution architect presents it to them and then says, okay, if you think your organization is capable of doing these things, that's great. Now you know what you need to do. But if you're small enough and or maybe you don't have the resources or time to do these things, we're happy to do that too. And he can then go implement those things on a time and materials basis based on what he estimates the number of hours are going to take. So that is what we offer to people almost always at the beginning of an AI engagement. And in fact, we're doing that now for just most of our engagements. If it's an ERP delivery or if it's a CRM delivery or Power Apps, a data warehousing project, that tenant assessment, if they are on Microsoft technologies, is almost always something that we encourage them to do up front.
Okay.
Because inevitably, in the age that we're in AI, somebody somewhere in the organization, hopefully not as a shadow IT project, is going to unleash AI.
Correct.
It's going to happen, right? So the sooner they have these things in place, the lower their risk is.
Absolutely. You touched upon some of the compliance aspects. So you were talking about FedRAMP, you were talking about HIPAA. There are classical policies that have existed before AI era, but now there are specific rules for AI, and mostly EU drives it, EU AI policies. So what is the rules or the compliance that within America or within a specific state, where do we stand?
That's a great question, and honestly, I don't know. I know that California has some data privacy rules that they have put in place. I believe Colorado is either looking at it or has implemented some. But unlike the EU, when it comes to those types of policies anyway, the United States is kind of like 50 little EUs, right? And normally it falls to the states because the federal government hasn't really done anything with data privacy or AI. Not to say they won't. I would imagine they will at some point. It's inevitable. But right now, from what I've seen in that space, is it's mainly the individual states. Now, what I will say is some of the state agencies that we get involved with that are interested in AI specifically have stated that the state government does have specific AI governance rules and policies that they haven't implemented statewide. It's just for the state government itself, right? And many times those things are very well documented, and they are things that we can read through or feed to Copilot, and then also feed the results of the analysis we've done in our tenant assessment and see if those things line up.
I see. So let's say you provide me a report. I'm an SMB and I do not have resources to implement them, and I do feel that the insights that you found need to be fixed. So when I come to you, is compliance part of that package?
Yes. Okay. If it was stated to us up front, right? If we know the organization has HIPAA things, or maybe they're trying to look at becoming one of the new ones that we've actually, Bailey is actually one of the few Microsoft partners in the country that's certified by the federal government to ensure CMMC compliance. And that is a policy that they're putting in place for all defense contractors. So anyone who does any work with the Defense Department has to be CMMC compliant, and we're one of the few partners who can actually go in and do that. And not only evaluate, but then also ensure that they are. And so I'm sorry, what was the exact question again?
The exact question is compliance part of the package?
Oh, so, yes, so if that is explained to us up front in the engagement, we'll absolutely make that part of the assessment package. So like for CMMC, we actually have tools in place now that we can actually run on the tenant and get that compliance report out, and then that gets compiled into the larger.
I'm going to put you on a role of, let's say you're on the government side. The technology moves really fast. Right? Like lots of models. You see different versions of the models thrown by different companies, and one is better than the other, and then there's another that comes better than this one. So it's moving pretty fast. And usually governance and compliance related to governments, when they want to come up with, they're always lagging behind this technology space, right? Until something really goes wrong, then it becomes a policy. So in my view, they have to be ahead of the technology movement before something happens, it needs to catch that, or you prevent them from happening rather than
Mhm.
you being a reactive loop, right? So if you put on a government person, I know you're not, just to get your perspective, so what would you do if you were in that space?
I would ensure that my governance and my security and whatever other adjective you want to use at that point around securing my IT and data estate are as hardened and as robust as they can be at all times. That way, as technology over here evolves, it still has to come through my protective layer. And as you said, government moves slow, tech moves very fast, right? But if I can take one piece of my IT department and say, you don't have a choice, you have to move fast, it would be that small piece to ensure that I am always up to date on the latest settings for my tenant, on data loss prevention policies, if I'm using something like Purview or any of the other tools that do that, making sure that there is automation and processes in place that are always followed to make sure pieces of data get tagged, to make sure if a new SharePoint site goes up, it is automatically secured according to our policies, which is configuration within SharePoint. A lot of organizations don't do that configuration because it's not out of the box. But making sure all those things are there, so if someone does turn a model loose in the organization, either inadvertently or on purpose, it can have the least possible damage because I know all of those protective layers are there already, no matter what.
Right. You were talking about automation. So where do you strike balance between automation versus human in the loop? When you introduce a human, it's cost delay, but still it's very good to confirm that AI
Sure.
is not hallucinating, but it does cause certain delays. Complete automations, yes, you get there, but we cannot trust AI completely, at least at this point of time. So where do you strike that balance?
So when I talk about automation, I'm usually referring to process automation
I see.
and not necessarily autonomous action automation. So a lot of the clients that come to us that have ideas for AI projects, I would say about 40% right now, actually have ideas for automation. They want to be able to pull transactions out of a spreadsheet on a SharePoint site somewhere and automatically have them come into their ERP. That is something for Power Automate or Logic Apps to do in the Microsoft world. That's automation. A human goes in, runs that flow, and now they see the transactions in the ERP, and then they go do in the ERP what they need to do. Right? That saves them a few minutes to several hours a day. But that's not necessarily AI could do that, but you're overspending if you have AI do that. Now, if you want to take that to the next step and say, whenever a row appears in the spreadsheet, I need to send an email to someone, or I need to not just get that in the ERP, but I want to do some analysis on it, or maybe these are coming in from untrusted sources, and I want to do some fraud detection on it, or spam detection on it. I want to make sure it's valid according to a certain set of rules before I import it. Now we're talking about AI. Now we're talking about an agent. We're talking about a reasoning model that can apply rules to unknown data that it wasn't trained on, right? So now we're moving into the AI world. When we talk about autonomous processes where, in fact, I have a client right now that wants to use AI for credit approvals for new clients. They have a very cumbersome process today for doing that, and it takes a lot of human research on these organizations. So they want a credit app to land in an email inbox, be read by AI, look at their rules for credit applications, then also look at anything like financial statements or anything else that the customer has submitted, and then make a decision based on their policies. Is this high, low, medium risk? What is it? Should it be approved or not? And the first question I asked them when they were presenting this idea to me, first, I think it's a really good use case, but then I said, you don't want it to actually approve the credit though, right?
That's the point.
And they said, oh no, absolutely not. We just want to take all the research and all the processing that goes into a human approving or denying a credit app away from the human so they can focus on that last step. and then present them with something that says, hey, according to all these pieces of evidence, and it lists, right, all the evidence that it has, I think, I being the agent, think they should be assigned a medium risk. But at the very end, the human is finally making that last decision. And what I normally tell folks, now there could be some autonomous things that humans might not need to be involved with, like sending marketing materials, as an example. If someone who isn't your client gets accidentally invited to an event, is it the end of the world? Maybe, maybe not. It'll probably land in that person's spam box anyway, right? So some of those things I see businesses are okay with, but anytime money is involved, anytime there's a financial transaction or even the potential for one, that's human in the loop, and that's time. I see very few, I have talked to businesses that haven't thought about that, but there's very few that haven't.
I mean, human in the loop is absolutely important in my view, no matter what, because the final stamp has to be human, right?
Yep.
So you capture all the flaws, that if there are flaws from the AI before it becomes an incident.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And how do you measure the AI success? Let's say you go and you implement, this is successful versus, we made a mistake. How do you measure that? What is the metrics that you follow?
So it's a little different, I would say, for every company. It depends on what success means to them in their organization. Maybe it's a reduction in the amount of time people spend on non-critical, I'll say, tasks. Things like copying and pasting from spreadsheets or uploading files or trying to find something on a file server, right? Maybe that's, for them, their measure of ROI or success, right? And for our clients, it's always about ROI. Always about that. A lot of this stuff can get very expensive very fast. And for small businesses and even medium corporate businesses, they're not necessarily against spending the money, but they want to know they're spending it for the right reasons and in the right ways. So it always comes back to ROI. So it's about, as part of that upfront process, defining what success looks like. For a lot of organizations, especially like in my talk, I mentioned personal agents versus organizational agents. And so for personal agents, for a lot of organizations, it's not only about the time that it's saving people, but it's also that people are actually using it, right? Investing in something, even something as straightforward as just Microsoft Copilot and buying a high-end license for it, they want to make sure that people are actually using it. We've seen organizations that say, everybody needs Copilot, everybody wants AI, they're all demanding it, and I want to turn off ChatGPT. Cool. So they buy 100 licenses of Copilot at $30 a month per user. So they're spending $3,000 a month on this thing, and then they actually go into the Copilot dashboard and see 0 usage. That's disheartening, and then they either want to get rid of the licenses, or if they're still bullish on AI, then they come to somebody like us, a partner like us, a consultancy, and say, why aren't people using this? What can you do to help this? I've made this investment, they asked me to make it, but now they're not using it, right? And that's where we can either workshop some things or figure out, do interviews and figure out why its use isn't there. And 9 times out of 10 when we see that, it's because people don't know how to use it. They use it once, they ask it a question, it doesn't give a reasonable response, and they're done.
I've seen that too.
They think it's a crystal ball, and it's just not.
You need to train the AI to work for you, and it's like a baby. It learns as you keep working with it. I've seen developers trying IDEs. It's not coding well. I would rather code it by myself. Now they can go a day without a coding tool. So that's a transformation I've seen. But I absolutely agree with you.
The development world is, I mean, it's where it started. GitHub Copilot started the whole thing, right? But the reason why it works so well now and it's so mature is because it has been around and people have been using it. And I was very reluctant to accept it for my development tasks, but now, like you said, I can't do anything in an IDE without Copilot open.
Right. All right. Thank you, Chris. Wonderful talking to you today.
Thank you.